utilization of manufacturing today is around 68.3%, and the rest of it's lying idle. Utilization around 86% is usually considered an optimum for an economy. And that's all well and good, but the problem is who's going to buy the things?
Okay.
And you have unemployment, which the government says is 9.5%, but they also say there's a thing out there called U6. And U6 includes the short-term unemployment,
right?
The people who are discouraged, the people who are on part-time, and the average worker is working 33 hours a week, and the people who have no longer are receiving unemployment benefits. And so they put that figure at 16.5%. Well, if you go one step further, you'll find that the government uses a thing called the birth-death ratio. And what it means is that they can't visit all the companies or contact all the companies of small and medium size. So they come up with a formula and they guess at what the increase or decrease is each month. And there's never a decrease. And of course, that is impossible. And on top of that, these increases average about 185,000 jobs a month. So if you withdraw that from U6, the figure you come up with is 20.5%. So we have 20.5% unemployment, and it seems to be climbing. And the people who, the companies that are making these earnings are cutting back so that they can do better in the marketplace.
Right.
And that makes less and less workers. So we can't go to manufacturing because they can't expand because they're laying off. And it's sort of a circular thing, and it leads nowhere.
So, all right. So then it may be, obviously, a while before things will get better here in this country, and that who knows exactly how bad it will get before it starts to get better. Hopefully it will get better. But in the meantime, what originally put you on my radar was I was asking around about anybody who knew anything about Goldman Sachs. Because I've been quite curious about what seems like a real sweet deal that they not only got, I mean, we saw that in the news, but also kind of continue to get. And that there's something about this particular company which this makes me feel like this has got to be a better than average connected company into the U.S. government, that they keep getting these opportunities. And that's originally how your name came up, because you've been looking into Goldman Sachs for a while, right?
Yes, and that's a very conservative way of putting it.
Yeah, I was trying to.
I think you have to go back into the 1940s. And in those days, I think you can go back to the turn of the 20th century as well, when J.P. Morgan was the big hitter, so to speak. And incidentally, I spent 28 years in the brokerage business, and I owned my own firm for a number of those years. So I'm familiar with what goes on professionally in that business. And, of course, I've been affiliated with economics and finance for some years since then, in writing for the last 20 years or so. With that said, going back to the beginning of the 20th century, J.P. Morgan was extremely powerful and had an extreme hold on the United States government. After the Second World War, the dominant firm was Dillon Reed. And I think it's sort of like musical chairs that these big firms play. And today, the big hitter is Goldman Sachs. Now, what Goldman did, like many others, is in the early 1990s, they became involved in derivatives. And derivatives are like insurance policies. And that started to grow exponentially. And at the same time, they decided within the brokerage business, generally speaking, especially the larger firms, that what they do is try to use computers to be able to foresee things that they should be doing in the future to be profitable. And as years went by, what happened was that the bigger firms became more and more sophisticated in the use of computers and the use of algorithms, as they're called.
Right.
I mean, today we even have what they call predator algorithms, and so Goldman, because of their connections, was able to put themselves in a very propitious situation, and I'll explain that. The New York Stock Exchange has a computer, and the computer has orders fed into that computer. And what you see on NBC and the floor of the New York Stock Exchange is very misleading because very few of the trades are made the way that they're depicted today in the television program. Most of it is done by the computer.
Sure.
And it's fed through an electronic system.
Right.
And in this computer, they have all these orders going through. And what firms can do is pay a fee, and the larger the fee that they pay, the closer they get to the computer physically. And so they can have their computer next to the New York Stock Exchange computer, and that's what Goldman Sachs has. And, of course, right near them is Morgan Stanley and J.P. Morgan Chase and Citigroup and on and on. And so when the orders come through, the program, because of its proximity in nanoseconds, is able to identify orders coming through, whether they're on the long side of the market or on the short side. And the short side of the market is when you bet that a stock is going to go down rather than up. And so they are privy to orders before anybody else is. And they are able to counteract what's going on with the orders in order to make a larger profit. And it's
well,
called
why is Goldman Sachs given that opportunity? Why them?
I can't answer that because I really don't know, but I would presume that it would be because of their connections within the New York Stock Exchange and within government as well, because government has a great deal to say about what goes on in the markets, usually indirectly. And
well, how many,
especially at that level.
How many of these brokerage houses enjoy the same status that Goldman Sachs does?
There's about 15 of them.
And are they all equal, or is it just my imagination that Goldman Sachs seems to get a bigger, like a sweeter deal than everybody else?
The latter.
Okay.
They do, and for what reason I think, is the interconnectivity and the relationship that Goldman has with administrations, not just Republican or Democrat, both of them. And if you notice, the appointments are very heavily in their favor, especially in areas of finance.
Sure.
Although there are people who from Goldman who are working at the Federal Reserve and in other parts of government, but most of them are in the financial area, like the Treasury Department. And so being connected that way, they got to jump on everybody. And essentially what they're doing is they're front-running the trades of other professionals who are acting for themselves as well as others. And then coming down the line are hedge funds, the mutual fund industry, and then you have private money management, and you have private equity. These are different facets of the upper echelon of investing. And so what happens, even from a professional point of view, you've got a small group of companies that are beating everybody else to the punch consistently.
Right.
And by smelling and seeking out these trades in nanoseconds, they are able to make anywhere between a half a penny and 2 or 3 cents on a trade. Well, if you're doing that several 100,000 times a day or whatever the figure is, you're
right.
making lots of money.
Well, let's hold on. I got to know more, and I know you've researched more, so I want to find out about Goldman Sachs then and these other elite groups, and what you've been able to uncover through your research. Coming up next, Bob Chapman, the international forecaster. You can link up to him through coasttocoastam.com. This is Ian Punnett. Reading the international forecaster from Bob Chapman, he says the causes of the depression are yet to be addressed. He knows what they are. He'll tell us what they are coming up in just a minute. Also, I want to find out more about Goldman Sachs, especially with the news about the kind of the sweet deals they continue to get. What is that legacy in there that allows them to get the privilege that they and a few others enjoy over others on Wall Street? We'll talk about it with Bob Chapman, the man who knows, on Coast to Coast AM. This is Ian Punnett. Bob Chapman's an international forecaster, trend watcher, and you can link up to him through coasttocoastam.com. So you've been sort of curious. You've been sort of probing into the Goldman Sachs thing, and this is and any of these other of the big houses that are up there. You talked about this goes back into the